Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Market Hall. I'm Charlie Werger. I'm chair of the board of directors here. We're going to have a fine evening tonight. Obviously, we love the performing arts here. And we believe that sometimes we should create a special opportunity to thank, honor, express our appreciation to performing artists, especially those of our own, those who have roots here in Peterborough. So that's what we're about tonight. Has been the purpose of our Bright Light series over the years. This evening you're going to learn some great things, some very interesting facts about two great performers. And because of who they are, you're also going to be entertained, not just get some facts, but you're going to have some great entertainment. And leading us on through this journey, this fun biographical journey, our MC, Richard Plant, who is an actor, writer, professor emeritus at U of T and also at Queen's University. He's going to take us along and keep control of things. So, without further ado, Richard Plant.
Oh, thank you, Charlie. Discreetly said. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen, from me. Welcome to Bright Lights, another in the occasional series of events focusing on local people whose achievements deserve recognition. This evening is unique, though, unlike the others ones so far. It's the first time a father and son duo has been featured. But before we bring them out, especially for those of you who don't know me at all, I feel some necessity to explain my presence as the superfluous host. As Charlie said, I'm Richard Plant, but I'm more commonly known as Dick. And it was as Dick I met Tim Rowat. University of Western Ontario, dare I say it, slightly more than 50 years ago, where we shared an interest in theater, folk music, among other things, and particularly Gilbert and Sullivan.
Hello, Graham. Hello, Dad.
Oh,
and hello to everyone in Market Hall this evening.
We don't need that yet. But it was a nice try. Since then, although until a decade or so ago, from different regions, we continued to share those interests. I've watched his talented sons, Tim's talented sons, Chris and Graham, grow into remarkable careers. So, many of you are certainly familiar with Tim's achievements. You're going to be somewhat less familiar with Chris and Graham, so a brief introduction. Chris, the absent one tonight, is a triple threat as an architect, a designer, an artist in Nelson, BC, and on the side, he has a life as an outdoor adventurer, a brilliant photographer, who's about to embark on a trip to Ellesmere Island, hence he's not here tonight. Several years ago, he guided and, thank goodness, protected Tim from polar bears on a trip into Canada's high north. Graham, on the other hand, is a triple threat in a different world, at least a somewhat different world, as you will soon see in person, and should I say, in persona. He has developed a highly successful career on Broadway and elsewhere in the United States and Canada, with some side trips to other parts of the world. He's married to an equally gifted performer, Kate Baldwin. That is the real Kate Baldwin, not the fictitious one on House of Cards. Graham's Kate gets to sing with Sondheim and has been doubly awarded a Tony and Drama Desk nominations for Best Actress in a Musical. And sometime, when you have a moment, go online and check her singing Glaucomora. It's exquisite. They have a 4-year-old son, whose very name speaks of his genetic destiny, comma James, and he already has a guitar. So, here I am, with a chance to sit among the stars. When I and my wife Susan moved to this area in retirement, we were immediately ushered into the community activities by Tim's energy and urgency. As some of you who have gone to the theater will know, Tim has a lot to answer for. It was his doing that audience had to watch me play Scrooge, and in other local theatrical and musical endeavors, and in short, he's responsible for my being here, and to an extent, for who I am. So, now, Tim did this wonderful script for us. Nothing left to chance, but you'll see. So, now, let's welcome Sir Samson Legend, Captain Constant, Benenson the Bear, Harry Bright, and King Herod, Sir Toby Belch, Count Dracula, Valamon, there he comes, a Tanglefoot, Javert, the Hedge, the Mikado himself, Richard Henry Lee, Bob Wallace, Gaston, and the Beast, the Egg Beater, and the singing pile of dirt.
Center picture in the bottom, first time Graham and I were on stage together. Very top picture is Richard Glenn in our very early years at Western. He is the Duke of Plaza Toro in the Gondoliers. And what else? And of course that's Graham as a what? Peacock.
Oh yeah, there was,
Elementary school.
there was a nativity play at Queen Mary, and that was the peacock.
Anyway, you can figure out the rest. At least one of you in the audience will remember our high school days. We grew up in a high school where we sang every Friday morning. And you notice that this crowd of students, which is before my time, are segregated. The basses are sitting on this side, the tenors are sitting on that side, and the sopranos and the altos are sitting in the middle. Tomorrow evening, had the stars aligned, there would be singing in that same auditorium, and you can see the murals on the wall of the auditorium. There would be singing. The high school closed in 1982. But they still go into that building once a year and sing. And in my teaching career, that's what we did. In the schools where I taught, we sang as a school every Friday morning. Now, it took a while to get into that. And the high school teacher who was directing that choir, and that was the nucleus of the singing. The high school teacher, Carl Chapman, was the one who really was responsible for that. And we're going to open with a song that is not a traditional opening song. It's from Carousel. And it's a song that I've been singing since I went to that high school, which is the 1950s. And interestingly enough, it's a song that will be featured in the Bonaccords and Jubilaires concert in May. It's a song that will be performed by the Peterborough Concert Band in their concert coming up on, I don't know, soon. Justin and a group of us have been singing it in a choral group that he runs. It is the inspiration when a crowd sang this song The members of Queen came back the next day because they wanted songs that their audience could sing. The members of Queen came back with "We Are the Champions" and "We Will Rock You" the next day, based on what they heard from this song. And of course, this song is the theme of the Liverpool Football Club. Let's go, boys. Next line. We want you to sing like we would be singing in our high school and in our schools. And you know these songs. At least my song should know. When you walk through a storm, hold your head up. And don't be afraid of the dark. Wonderful. At the end of the storm, there's a golden sky and the sweet silver song of a lark. Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, though your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. Instrumental, please. Feel free to sing harmony, because some of you know it. Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, though your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. Wow.
We've got a bit of an intervention here that might be a little bit of a surprise. Cue the audio.
Hello, Graham. Hello, Dad. And hello to everyone at Market Hall this evening. This is Chris Rowat, coming to you from Nelson, British Columbia. I hope everyone's having a great time. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you tonight. I would like to share some memories of Graham and Dad that have stayed with me over the years. I'll start with Graham.
Could be a long night.
Graham's career in the theater started very young. We were, of course, in high school together, and somehow Graham got the job of delivering the morning announcements over the PA system. It was the usual mundane stuff. Upcoming events, school outings, the principal telling students not to smoke near the front doors. Well, Graham turned the mundane into entertainment. Many a night I would walk past his room, and through the crack in the open door, I would see him furiously writing scripts and recording sound effects with a record player and tape deck. He loved it, and his morning show became a bit of a thing at the school. Now, one particular morning, when Graham had a few months under his belt and was feeling confident in his abilities, he experimented with his artistic license. There was an announcement about courses at Sir Sanford Fleming College. What came next, I'll never forget. When it came time to say Fleming, he kind of broke Fleming into two words, Fleming, and it followed by 10 seconds of coughing and clearing his throat. I froze in my seat, not sure what to think. Graham had just crossed some kind of invisible comedy line. We were all laughing, but I don't think administration agreed. I think Graham was given the rest of the week off. Fast forward 15 years later, I'm at the Elgin Winter Garden Theatre in downtown Toronto, and Graham is playing the Beast in the touring Broadway show Beauty and the Beast. Under a massive cape, wigs, horns, and fangs, and in front of 1,500 people, he's unrecognizable. I'm excited for him, but I can't really see him. But beneath all the costume, I recognize his eyes. And then he sings, and hearing his voice up there at center stage leaves me kind of in awe. And for the rest of the show, I sit in amazement watching my brother on the big stage. He had come a long way from the morning announcements. And now for Dad. I spent much of my youth tagging along with Dad to rehearsals at the Peterborough Theatre Guild, or as an underage and underpaid stagehand for Dad's folk band, Tanglefoot. Those were fun times. I learned a lot, and what I learned had a lasting impact on my life. From designing sets with Dad for shows at the Theatre Guild, I went on to study architecture in university. From being around musical instruments, I've played drums, harmonica, and guitar over the years. I even played in a few high school plays. To this day, I occasionally have nightmares about being on stage and not knowing any of my lines. And speaking of school and being on stage, I have a memory from public school that I'd like to share. Dad was touring a lot with Tanglefoot, teaching Canadian history to students through song and storytelling. One day they were coming to my school, Queen Mary. I admit I was a bit nervous. What would my friends think of 3 adults dressed in fur and leather and telling stories of fish, furs, and trees? Boring. The entire school filed down to the auditorium. I was already embarrassed, like any kid would be. I felt like everyone was looking at me. The house lights dimmed. Up came the brightly colored stage lights as 3 silhouetted figures strode out onto the stage carrying guitars. It looked like a rock concert. Everyone went wild. People were whistling and cheering, and they hadn't started playing yet. Oh God, this place is going to go dead when they start playing, I worried to myself. And they started playing. And the whistling and the cheering continued. It was loud. You couldn't really hear the song. I'll never forget the trace of a scowl on Dad's face as he waved at us to be quiet. We eventually settled down, and it slowly dawned on me that people were liking the show. I remember friends and strangers coming up to me after the show and telling me how cool they were. I just nodded and thanked them, but that day I found a greater appreciation and admiration for Dad's talents and interests. That day I began to understand that there was something special about performing and singing and telling stories. That day I realized there was nothing to be embarrassed about if you stood up in front of others. if you could get up on a stage in front of a crowd and sing your heart out, well, you could do a lot of things in life. So thanks for that, Dad.
So your interest in performing began very early, but there's obviously a very large gap between then and now. And as someone who was in the first course that trained prospective high school teachers, I didn't last long, trained prospective high school teachers to initiate the new curriculum that taught theater arts for the first time. I remember a time when any kind of dramatic activity was simply extracurricular. It took second place to any kind of sports, and I'm a bit of a jock myself, so I was able to bridge the gap a bit. But it took second place to virtually everything. It only fitted in when somebody had time to do it. Given where you've gone with your career, I wonder if your high school was unusual in its approach to these kind of things.
Well, you know, there was a man at PCBS named John Murphy, and he was a wonderful man. He taught French, and he ran the drama club, which met after school, and that's where I first got to do plays. And I did a handful with Mr. Murphy, as I knew him. It's hard to call him John. And he's no longer with us, but he was a wonderful man. And but the plays we put on we did during school hours. We presented them to other classes during the day. And then when I entered grade 12, two new teachers came into the school, Larry Doyle and Susan Brown, who, English teacher and music teacher, and they hit it off, and they wanted to do, they thought, what if we put on a big show? Let's put on a musical. We'll present it at nighttime. We'll sell tickets to the public. And they decided on Little Shop of Horrors. So we did Little Shop of Horrors. I was cast as the evil dentist, and that was the best thing ever in the world. And the following year we did Grease.
I saw it.
Yeah. And that was my last year in high school. And I think it was those two larger performances for a public audience that made me think, you know, this is something I really enjoy, and if I don't follow through with this, I'm going to regret it. And thankfully I had parents who, though, you know, pragmatic and cautious, were willing to say, you gotta follow your dreams. So that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'd like to...
There's a kid inside, and I have him with me always. There's a kid inside, walking down old high school hallways. There's a kid inside, at a desk, at a dance, in the hall, in the showers. There's a kid inside, to this very day. A try for that high pop fly that I fumbled one September, and he makes a fuss over some A+ that I shouldn't still remember. And he goes along, getting hurt, getting mad, fighting fights that are over. And unless I'm strong, all my senses are carried away. I can feel my hand, my trembling hand, on Michelle's Angora sweater. I can hear my band, that awful band, only now they sound much better. I can see the kid I used to be, on the stage, on the field, on the lunch lines. I can feel him talking at me. Every time I think I don't care, I blink and he's there again. He's there again, fighting ancient wrongs, humming old hit songs in my head, saying, come along, with the rush of old sensations. My child should wake and my heart should ache every time I smell carnations. Something rings a bell, anything at all it takes is the slam of a locker, or the switch from summer to fall. A change of season seems barely reason, but there he goes again. Harmony songs, fighting ancient wrongs, humming old hit songs in my head. Saying, come along, come along, come along for the ride. To a time and place I cannot forget if I tried. There's a kid inside.
When I was in high school and later in university, folk music came to be a potent way for many of us to express what we thought and thought we felt. And I think you had the same kind of experience, Tim. Well, you were in high school and in university. Where does it lead you?
Well, every high school in London, Ontario, and I went to Beck Collegiate along with this guy sitting right here, who drove up from Hamilton today. Anybody else here that went to high school with? Just checking. Every high school had a folk group. Every high school had their own version of the Kingston Trio. And, you know, we played around town, and then we decided, what the heck? We're gonna drive to Toronto, and we're going to audition for the Mariposa Folk Festival with Edith Folk sitting right there in the audience. And away we went with Ian and Sylvia and Gordon Lightfoot. We got paid $75, I think. Ian and Sylvia and Gordon Lightfoot got a lot more than we did. But in those days, it wasn't a lot. And then we also got hired by the local radio station, CKBT Radio. And we were hired to tour the Kawartha Lakes on a pontoon boat, stop at the various locks and sometimes at one of the inns or the resorts, and we would put on a little concert of folk music and give out free samples of Fritos corn chips.
Can we just pause for a moment? Because we've got somebody here. Tim, would you tell us who's in the group?
In the group?
Yeah.
Well,
Do you remember?
yeah, vaguely. Up in the top left, you see, I think Ian Crichton and Larry Walsh. Brad Myers is pulling the boat. He's on the far right of the picture. That's Larry Walsh on a very cold day eating Fritos corn chips because that was all we had for snack. And the captain of the ship was Don Percy, the morning mayor. And of course,
So it's at this point we bring on our special guest. Is he here? Is he hiding in the house?
Very.
Wow!
In the 60s, I'm directing my comments mostly to Graham, because Graham, your dad, knows me pretty well, and some of the audience might remember the mid-60s. I was known then as Percy the Morning Mayor, and I was a part of a wonderful group of radio communicators. They included the likes of Ken Kay, Del Prairie, and Bruce Anderson, George Franks, Sean Ayer, Johnny Gilbert, many others. And we were a pretty competitive group in those days at CKPT. And our then general manager, we were part of the Chum organization, and our then general manager, Fred Sherratt, thought it would be a dandy idea to do a series of shows throughout the Kawarthas. This began in the early 60s. And the first year was the PT Caravan, and we had a covered wagon with two mismatched horses that traveled through the Kawartha Lakes, all by land, of course, and stopped in various spots and did a show. And then came back to the Peterborough exhibition where we had a stage set up. Well, that went all right, but then Fred decided we need something more. So he brought in a group from London, Ontario, called, oddly enough, the London Town Criers, of which your father was a part, a big part, I might add. Well, he was the tallest one in the group. And decided no more land travel, so he rented the world's leakiest houseboat, called it the PT Showboat, and sent us out into the Kawartha Lakes. Well, after banging into several docks, we would stop and do shows along the way. We did that for about a week or 10 days, and then came back to the Peterborough exhibition and did, as I recall, between 6 and 8 shows per day on the main stage of the Peterborough exhibition. Well, an event occurred in which your father, Graham, proved absolutely heroic. Now, this event came a few days into the show. Everybody was a little bit frazzled. And as part of the show, we handed out packages of Dad's cookies and some jars of pickles, as I recall. And we wouldn't just hand them out, we kind of flipped them out into the crowd. Well, there's one particular show, evidently the crowd wasn't too impressed with the show or with the cookies and pickles, and they started throwing them back. And they bounced one off Ken Wilson's head. And Ken was the most active of the group, let me put it that way. And he had a hair-trigger temper. And he turned around, leaped off into the crowd, and landed splat on a nice little lady who was standing in about the third row and knocked her flat. Well, the fight was on. Some guy with his glasses turned sideways and his hair all over the place grabbed me and said, "Call yourself a man?" Well, I was going to debate the topic with him, but at that moment, your father, standing tall, decided to bring calm to the melee. There were fights going on all over the place. And your dad, Graham, stood there and started singing the national anthem. The crowd was turning around in amazement to see this guy standing on stage. And everything finally settled down. From that moment on, we had the most popular show on the Midway. Everybody wanted to see if there was going to be another fight. And we never gave away another package of Dad's cookies or a jar of pickles, all because of your dad. I didn't think he told you that story. Hey, Tim, great memories, huh? We miss Larry and Ian, of course. Brad and I are in fairly constant touch, and I understand Ken is now a crossing guard in Kingston. The world goes round. Love and warmth from Winnipeg.
You might think that's not all true, but it is.
So it's a good setup for the next song.
Well, we'll get there.
Yeah. No rush, Brad.
No.
All night.
I've come all this way, believe me. For the last few weeks, folks, I've been receiving these interesting emails from Tim, mostly graphic in nature, with a lot of the images that you're seeing tonight, or will see, etc. These are sort of teasers, I think, to whet my appetite. And I've commented on many of them, etc.
You can go through the slides. Sorry, Brad. You can go through a couple of these slides while he's talking.
But we never got to the point where I actually said, Tim, I'll be there for sure. In fact, I knew I was going to be there for sure, but I wanted to come sort of unbeknownst. So the last email was Sunday night, and he finally broke down and said, "Are you coming?" And I wrote back, "Well, Tim, I'd sure like to be there, but I've got a meeting in Montreal midweek, and right now, in the poorest maple season of the last decade, I'm trying to salvage the last bit of sap from my trees and have to boil it all up before it goes off." And that's all true. But I stayed up day and night for 2 days to boil up all my sap.
Now, these folks know where you live?
Oh,
Yeah, you better explain that.
I live on a little island northeast of Quebec City, about an hour and a half, and an 18-minute free government ferry ride out into the St. Lawrence, called Île aux Coudres, which means Hazelnut Island. It was discovered by Jacques Cartier. Well, the locals already knew it was here, the First Nations. But he found it in September 5th, 1534. He landed, came ashore. There were 3 boats and they needed moorings overnight. There's a nice little bay there. And he wandered around and he wrote in his journal, which is still extant somewhere, probably in the archives of France, that they have a nut on this island, the coudrier, which means hazelnut. And he said the meat of the nut is as sweet, if not sweeter, than those of our own France. And because of that, I call it Île aux Coudres. And that's how the island came to have its name. And I'm so good at that story because I relate it to American tourists who come every summer. So my wife Shirley and I moved there in 2009, having spent 35 years in British Columbia. We are the English community on the island, all 2 of us.
But what does this have to do with me, Brad?
Well, you asked if people knew where I live.
Well, yeah, you didn't need to take the whole night.
You better brought some syrup.
So anyhow, Tim, how could I not be here for your night and Graham's special night? Graham I've known since he was a wee lad as well. We have pictures, y'all go back. But in honesty, by the time I get through with you tonight, you might wish I'd stayed on the island.
Never.
We'll see.
Oh.
Yeah. They say that to understand the present, you have to understand the past. You know that saying, yes? All right, good. So I just would like to take Tim and you back for a few minutes to those early formative days of which he's spoken back in London, Ontario, back collegiate. I've been in a succession of rock and roll bands since I was in grade 9, 10, 11, and then I met this guy, Tim Rowat. And Tim played banjo when he was interested in folk music. And because of him, he drew others around. You saw us up there a few minutes ago on stage, the 5 of us, Tim, Larry, and Ken. And I switched to folk music. And we practiced hard, and we went off to Toronto. This is in the late 62, early 63. There's a club down there called the Bohemian Embassy. It was run by Don Cullen, and as a silent partner, Margaret Atwood. We just learned that some years ago.
I did not know that.
And we would go down there on the weekends, and they had hootenanny nights, etc. They had lots of other things too. Saturday night hootenanny nights. So we went down of a Saturday, and we talked to Don, and we got sort of a tentative slot for the evening. And so we had time on our hands. I guess you do. So Larry Walsh said, let's go to the Shakes. And the Shakes in those days referred to the Victory Burlesque Theater on Jarvis Street. There has been a number.
There are children present, you know.
There have been a number of them in Toronto, but they diminished. And in 1963, the only one left was the Victory. And this was not a sleazy strip joint with pole dancers or anything like that. It had a big stage, a little pit orchestra, an MC with a tuxedo, and we were there for the show. It was Larry's idea, I think, not mine. So we were there watching, and there was one lady came on, her name was Bon Bon the Yum Yum Girl.
Yes, it was.
So we watched her, and then Tim's, those of you who know Tim, he's quite a punctual lad. He says, guys, we should get going back. Yeah, we'll watch the next one. And then it was April Flowers. She came up. And then Tim, guys, let's go. And he got up and started to walk up the center aisle out. April Flowers had just done her thing, and the MC came back out and looked around. There was Tim. thinking we were all dutifully behind him, and he said, "Hey, Sonny, where are you going?" Slunk back to his seat, and I think we watched one another. Tim was from a very straight-laced London, Ontario family. I can still picture his dad, Captain Rob Lee Rowat, in his vest, sort of silk smoking jacket, smoking his pipe, his mother Rowena. And at Tim's house on Princess Street, Tim's aunt, on whose side? Granny, your granny. Is it your mom?
My grandmother?
Yeah, was it your
Mom.
Okay. She was there, well,
Lily.
Lily. Yeah, I wouldn't ever have referred to her by Lily. But I remember Tim shot me one day. We were on our way to school, I think, or had some back and forth, and he said, "You know what Granny told me today?" I said, "No, she shot me." She said, "Keep your pecker in your pants." And for her to say this, it was such a shock for Tim and such a shock to me that I remembered to tell it to you here in 2015. Anyhow, I need to correct something that Tim said a few moments ago. He made mention of Miracles, the folk festival. Then he said we went to Toronto to audition for that. It was not the case, Tim. I need to correct you on this. Seriously.
Hey, Brad, Dick's giving you a signal.
All right.
Now, Tim's just worried about the next story.
Well, we got
We should move along.
all right, we will. Final moment. We went down to audition for a club on Church Street called the Fifth Peg. And we were there, and we sang for the owner, Jack Wall, and he said, "Yes, we'd like to hire you." You know, and we came actually Easter that year, opposite Dave Broadfoot, a young comic. But he said, "There's some ladies in the back who would like to see you." So we went over, and it was Edith Folk and another lady, Estelle Klein. And they said, "We're here auditioning later for the Mariposa Folk Festival. And we'd like to know, would you like to be in it?" Would we? And that's how we came to be there.
Thank you.
I
I'm glad you clarified that.
Thank you so much.
You better stay as soon as possible. There we go. The chorus, I mean, Don Percy talked about the big brawl that occurred at the Peterborough X. Well, this is a song about another brawl. You'll notice the wonderful outfits that we wore at the time. The translation of the chorus reads, "Whack all the dad out, dance to your partner, welt the floors, your trotter shake. Wasn't it the truth I told you? Lots of fun at Finnegan's Wake." Tim Finnegan lived in Walking Street, a gentle Irishman, mighty odd. He did beautiful brogues, so rich and sweet, and to rise in the world he carried a hod. You see, the sword of the temple and claim, with a love for the liquor poor Tim was born. To help him along with his work each day, to drop for the crater every morn. All the night, and dance to your partner, what for your wasn't it the truth I told you? Lots of fun at Finnegan's Wake. One morning Tim felt fine with all his head felt heavy, which made him shake. Fell from his ladder and he broke his skull, and we carried him home his corpse to wake. Wrapped him up, made a nice clean sheet, laid him out upon the bed. A bare
about to start a professional career. I wonder how your early shows went.
Well, you know, we put up the Shaw slide. The first big break was the Shaw Festival, which I had heard of, and I had been to visit with my dad. So getting an apprenticeship there in the summer of '96. Although that says '97, it's because they used the actors in the '96 company to do the artwork for the following year. And I was there in 1996, and I mentioned Billy Vickers, and that's him right there. Just wanted to say the Shaw Festival was an amazing experience. You would rehearse your shows, the shows would be in performance, and then there were an infinite number of other opportunities for you when you were there, rehearsing workshops and concerts, and someone was scheduling it for you, which was great. So all you had to do was roll out of bed and wake up, and you were learning, and it was the most supportive and educational place I'd ever been to.
And throughout your career, I'm aware that there are all kinds of illustrations of very difficult decisions that professional performers like yourself have to make, including some around the Shaw Festival, if I remember correctly. But how did you get from the Shaw to Beauty and the Beast?
Well, what's fascinating is that one of the reasons I think I got the job at the Shaw Festival was that I had auditioned for the original company of Toronto, the Toronto version of Beauty and the Beast, and I didn't get in. So I focused on my voice and improving my singing voice, and it was during that time that I got the job at Shaw. And when Shaw ended, literally the day after the Shaw Festival ended, I went in and auditioned for replacements in the Toronto cast, and I got an offer, and that's when I had to decide whether I wanted to go back to Shaw for a second season or I wanted to do Beauty and the Beast. And it felt like it was incredibly hard, because I can still picture the life I could have had at Shaw, which was supportive and educational and wonderful, but I wanted to know what this was like. I wanted to know what it was like to be in a mega musical. And months later, I ran into Christopher Newton, the artistic director of the Shaw Festival, in the aisle of a grocery store. And I had written him a note, I read him a letter, and explaining why I made the decision. And he came up and he had a smile on his face and he said, "So what's it like being a piece of pizza?"
I can add a little detail here. Because I worked with Ronald Brydon, very distinguished theatre critic, who was connected with the Shaw Festival. I can vouch for the fact that Christopher Newton and other people at the Shaw were greatly enamored of Graham's work, and we're counting and hoping that he would come back the next year. And he was aware of that. So it made the difficult, I'm sure, much, much more difficult.
Yeah, I kind of still wondered where my life would have gone if I had stayed there. And it would have been, I know it would have been wonderful, but also other wonderful things would have happened. But this is another opportunity to sing a great song that I discovered, which is...
But before you do the song, I got to talk about the trauma of being a parent. Not only is your kid going into showbiz, but you're going to the Princess of Wales Theatre to see him in his first performance as the Beast. And
because I was hired as an understudy, just to clarify, in Beauty and the Beast.
B. Corey was going to go, and we knew about it in advance. B. Corey went, she wrote a review about it, she interviewed Graham before the show, and I walked into there. My bladder was the size of a walnut, and my stomach was a huge knot for pretty well most of the show. And then the most remarkable thing is 2 weeks later, I went back and watched him do the role of Gaston, which was kind of blew my mind. 2 roles, same show. Go ahead, do your song.
My fortune is my face, laughing, crying, smiling. Look upon this face, meager, wistful, and beguiling. right profile, left profile, 3/4 and full face. Perfect, every angle right, cameraman's delight. 32 dazzling teeth, a sight divine. 32 one of them is almost mine, yes. All you've got is this face, and that's a fact. Face the truth, heaven knows, kid, you can't act. My fortune is my face, manly, boyish, leering, look upon this face. Evil, eager, and endearing. Right profile, left profile. A face that launched 1,000 films. Once this hairs begin to thin, here's a second chin. Once face underneath my eyes, here's a sad surprise. Pouches that will do for a kangaroo. When his face is gone, gone his fortune too. Come on, face. Keep it up. Keep working. There's a lot depending on you. Old gambling syndicates can't keep going on without you. 2 ex-wives and all that alimony. 3 kids and all their teeth to be fixed. Teeth stretching on for miles and miles into the horizon. Right profile, left profile, 3/4 and full face. So paint it up with tacks and fill it out with wax. You're not an actor, only for Max Factor. And this face.
Music and theater, Tim, were what you did in your spare time. And the career that paid the bills, I suppose, was education, but the two were very tightly intertwined. You had various kinds of interesting initiatives, ETV and things like that. How's that fit into your activities?
Well, I inherited a job of producing and directing educational television from Brad. He had the job before I did, and then he took off, headed out west, and I got the job of producing and directing educational television. And Joe Grant wrote the shows, and we had sets, and we had music, and the kids had. They used to say the kids had television. They had live French one day, which was a live teacher, and they had dead French the next day, which was a television program. But we had a lot of fun making these programs for about 6 or 7 years. And then when educational television died, that's the cue for the next slide, Tanglefoot rose out of the ashes, and Joe and I really became, and with the addition of Bob Wager, Joe and I became really serious about our country, about its songs and its stories and its images. We had the largest collection of Canadian art on slides in the country. Because all of these shows, and there were more, Fish, Furs and Trees, Mosquitoes, Mudholes and Rebels, Dust and Dreams, Welcome to New France, Voyagers and Vagabonds, they were all illustrated the same way you're seeing tonight on back here. You can see 2 screens, one on either side of us, and they had images on them. And they were from Canadian paintings, Eaton's catalog, all kinds of sources, Canada Illustrated. We had access to all kinds of visual libraries. You can go to the next slide. And these were some of the paintings that we used all very frequently. Frances Hopkins, her great canoe paintings. And if you go to the next one, which is, I think, the most remarkable painting because it's such a wonderful, evocative painting of, again, the same artist of a timber raft. And had we more time, and we would research stories, and we would research all kinds of history books, including our local authors, Catherine Partrail and you know, what's her name? And that's because I'm blanking and I'm trying to move this along because what was I going to say? I don't know.
That's okay. We've got a little interjection here.
Oh, again?
Oh, yeah. Well,
Is there still another seat at that table?
Anyway, cue the soundbite, please.
And now for Dad. I spent much of my youth tagging along with Dad to rehearsals at the Peterborough Theatre Guild, or as an underaged and underpaid stagehand for Dad's folk band, Tanglefoot. Those were fun times. I learned a lot, and what I learned had a lasting impact on my life. From designing sets with Dad for shows at the Theatre Guild, I went on to study architecture at university. From being around musical instruments, I've played drums, harmonica, and guitar over the years. I even played in a few high school plays. To this day, I occasionally have nightmares about being on stage and not knowing any of my lines.
Don't we all?
And speaking of school and being on stage, I have a memory from public school that I'd like to share. Dad was touring a lot with Tanglefoot, teaching Canadian history to students through song and storytelling. One day they were coming to my school, Queen Mary. I admit I was a bit nervous. What would my friends think of 3 adults dressed in fur and leather and telling stories of fish, furs, and trees? Boring. The entire school filed down to the auditorium. I was already embarrassed, like any kid would be. I felt like everyone was looking at me. The house lights dimmed. Up came the brightly colored stage lights as 3 silhouetted figures strode out onto the stage carrying guitars. It looked like a rock concert. Everyone went wild. People were whistling and cheering, and they hadn't started playing yet. Oh God, this place is going to go dead when they start playing, I worried to myself. And they started playing. And the whistling and the cheering continued. It was loud. You couldn't really hear the song. I'll never forget the trace of a scowl on Dad's face as he waved at us to be quiet. We eventually settled down, and it slowly dawned on me that people were liking the show. I remember friends and strangers coming up to me after the show and telling me how cool they were. I just nodded and thanked them. But that day, I found a greater appreciation and admiration for Dad's talents and interests. That day, I began to understand that there was something special about performing and singing and telling stories. That day, I realized there was nothing to be embarrassed about if you stood up in front of others. If you could get up on a stage in front of a crowd and sing your heart out, well, you can do a lot of things in life. So thanks for that, Dad.
This is a lot of really great stuff, and it's very emotional. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. This is a particularly interesting slide because it shows you how the whole Tanglefoot work translated into the classroom and into the schools, because all of us who were in Tanglefoot were also teaching at the same time, and we would take the research and the stories and the songs that we collected and wrote. We wrote a lot of traditional Canadian songs. Somebody, I think it said, Paul Rellinger said 300, that mind-boggling. Anyway, when I was at Ridpath School, we took the whole school. We had a First Nations population from Curve Lake, we had a French program, and of course we had the Anglo program. So we divided the whole school into 3 clans. We dressed them all up, we took them to the arena, and we put on a show with every kid in the school. And this is a poem, an enactment of a poem by Duncan Campbell Scott. And the first lines of it are, once in the winter out on the lake, in the heart of the Northland, far from the fort and far from the forest, a Chippewa woman with her sick baby crouched in the last hours of a great storm, frozen and hungry, she fished through the ice with a line of the twisted bark of the cedar and a rabbit bone hook, polished and marked. Fished with the bare hook all through the wild day, fished and caught nothing. But we're going to talk about this wonderful group of guys and this wonderful approach we had to teaching Canadian history and the songs and the stories. And I know you're all wondering where the name Tanglefoot came from. So all the words are, oh, they cut off. Yeah.
They cut off there too?
They cut off the first parts of the, you'll figure it out. On the banks of the Don, there's a dear little spot, a boarding house proper where you get your meals hot. You get fine bread and water and you don't pay a cent. Your taxes are paid for, your board and your rent. So turn out every man of you all in a line, from the cell to the stone yard, and you all must keep time. You work like a Turk till the bell it strikes 1 in that grand institution just over the dawn. I'm doing this in, you don't care what key I do it in? Okay. Justin, do you care? All right. If you want to get into that palace so deep, take Tanglefoot whiskey and get drunk on the street. You'll have a fine carriage to drive you from town to that grand institution just over the dawn. Our borders are honest, not one of them steal, for they count all the dimes and forks after each meal. Our windows are airy and barred up beside, just to keep our good borders from falling outside. Last chorus. So turn every man of you all in line, from the cell to the stone yard, and you all must keep time. You work like a Turk till the bell strikes 1 in that grand institution just over the dawn. In that grand institution just over the dawn. Moving right along.
You know, I was focused on a lot of, the songs I'm singing tonight were the things that were in my brain and I was focused on. And Dad had songs and, you know, I wasn't quite aware of what they all were. I know I had this. I have genetic
Predisposition.
You have none of it. From the days of when you sang these songs, they are still buried in my head. So I didn't know, wasn't quite sure what we were doing. And as soon as we hit the beginning of that song, I could sing along because I still have dozens of songs just buried inside my brain. I can't believe it's there. Imagine what I could be doing with that brain.
Oh, he's got So on one hand, we're hearing a complex story of the deep interest in, Tim's deep interest in enlivening and teaching Canadian history through performance, and your situation is both within Canada and beyond Canadian borders, and that's another area that you've had to make really, really difficult decisions about.
Absolutely. So I did Beauty and the Beast in Toronto, and the day that Beauty and the Beast closed, within 2 weeks after the Toronto production of Beauty and the Beast closed, I got a phone call as to whether I was available to go to join the New York company of Beauty and the Beast. And I had just started to believe that maybe my career could expand to other parts of Canada. after doing Beauty and the Beast. I thought that credit on my resume would get me auditions, and I would be like, okay, I could go to the Citadel Theater or Theater Calgary. I could start to branch out, and all of a sudden, my imagination had to expand to include the idea of going to New York. Now that wasn't a difficult decision, because of course anyone would leap at that. And I went to New York. I performed in Beauty and the Beast for about a year and a half. And when I got down there, I saw that there was so much more opportunity. There's so many more, I mean, it's where you would go. It's one of the great places you would go if you're an actor, because there's that many more opportunities. So that's why I decided to pursue a green card, because I was on a work visa, and I could only work for Disney. And I went out on the road with Les Miserables, because Les Miserables was willing to get me a work visa while I pursued my green card. And I was out on the road for 3.5 years with Les Mis, which is a long time to be a gypsy on the road. But I was part of, when you petition for your green card, when they actually pull up your number and say, okay, it's time to come and interview you, that you have to be, you better be employed. Because what you're basically saying to them is, if you let me come into your country, I will make money that you can tax. So that's why else would they let you in? So I stayed on that tour waiting for the call, and I got it. And you know, while I was on Les Mis, I saw every state you could imagine. We came up to Canada, which was great, except you know, Dad came out, visited, and drove a leg of it with me. But the day my work visa expired while we were in Canada, and the company said, well, you stay here until your papers are ready, and you know, we'll keep paying your salary. We got to go back into the States. Of course, they crossed back over from Vancouver into Oregon on September 10th, 2001. Yeah, so I spent a lot longer in Canada than I expected, because it took, obviously, a lot longer for my papers to come through. But I got to stay with Chris for 2 months. Anyway, I'm rambling, but Les Mis was a great experience. We went to China. We were the first mega musical, American musical to ever play China, which was wonderful. Colm Wilkinson came back for that run, and then we went to Korea. And in that show, I was in the ensemble, and I covered Javert. And I'd like to sing a song of his.
And just before you do that, I want to talk about the trauma of a parent. You know, there have been a few of those. Sitting in the audience, either watching one of two things. Your son lying dead on the stage after he's been, you know, all of the revolutionaries have been killed, all the rebels have been killed, or sitting on the stage, or sitting in the audience while he sings the next song and then jumps off the bloody bridge. Next one.
There, out in the darkness, a fugitive running, falling from grace, falling from God. God be my witness, I never shall yield till we come face to face, till we come face to face. He knows his way in the dark, but blind is the way of the Lord, and those who follow the path of the righteous shall have their reward. And if they fall as Lucifer fell, the flame, the sword, stars in your multitudes, scarce to be counted, filling the darkness is order and light. You are the sentinels, silent and sure, keeping watch in the night, keeping watch in the night. You know your place in the sky, you hold your course and your aim, and each in your season returns and returns, and is always the same. And if you fall as Lucifer fell, you fall in flame. And so it has been, and so it is written on the doorway to paradise, that those who falter and those who fall must pay the price. Oh, let me find him, that I